Welcome to the Between Tides podcast, sponsored by Portage Learning. If you're a high school student looking to build a brighter future, consider taking an online college course with us. Learn more at portagelearning.edu. And now, onto our featured episode. Ralph Blundo, welcome back to the podcast, man.
Well, it's good to be back, Tim.
Now, last time when we hung out, we talked a lot of hoops, but today I'd like to maybe veer off into secondary education, a little bit more about your role as an assistant principal at Newcastle High. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let me start with this one then. I think we all have this memory, or maybe it's an image of a principal, and I always sort of veer back to Principal Vernon in the Breakfast Club,
Yeah.
right? Disciplinarian, no nonsense, trying to make students' lives miserable. Now, I can't imagine you ever doing anything like that. So this is your chance, Ralph, to set the record straight. What is your role and what's a typical day look like?
Well, I think, as a principal, innately you become a leader. You become a leader for those kids and something for them to observe. And, there have been moments, our school district is a unique school district, the way it's evolved over time. And we had some really difficult years where we had some really difficult kids that made learning difficult. Okay. So when you talk about that persona, there were times that that was actually on display where you almost had to be that guy that was out there in the halls or in the classrooms and in the cafeteria letting you know that when I'm here, there's going to be no nonsense. And that's uncomfortable. You got that stupid look on your face all the time, that scowl and but we were trying to get to a certain place discipline wise where we can be effective educators too. Um, and over time, things that have helped our school is that you're always trying to help kids, and sometimes you have to move kids on to a different learning environment so that they can be successful. But at the same time, it's about the other kids in the school so that they can succeed. And as we've moved some kids into other learning environments and different placements and things like that, I've watched our school just get better and better, improve the whole entire culture of the school. The learning is better. The test scores improve. And then at that point in time, they can see a different Ralph Blundo and a different Kim Claditis and a different April Caldarelli. Those are my colleagues um, as assistant and head principals. So you know, yeah, I mean, there sometimes there's a message on your face depending on the kind of where the school was at that moment.
For sure. So most people know you as a highly successful basketball coach, and most coaches don't go into administration. So what made you jump in?
Well, there's a variety of reasons. I wanted to continue my education. I wanted to grow. I love teaching, but I didn't want to teach for 35 years. I wanted to move on to whatever I thought maybe was next in my profession. And for me, that was being an assistant principal. And at the time, that was a difficult move, Tim, because the school district had a policy that principals couldn't coach, administrators couldn't coach. So I knew once I made that move that it was maybe, the end of my coaching career. And so I was a coach I was a principal for 3 years. I actually coached at Westminster College at the time while I was doing it, and I was a principal for 3 years. Mark Stanley was the head coach before they decided to change the policy to allow principals to coach too. Now, at that point in time, I think there was this image that being a principal and being a coach was just a conflict of interest, when the reality is being an assistant principal and being a coach was probably the best marriage that this school could possibly have. It was definitely a tremendous marriage for the basketball program, but I just think for the school in general, what it helps create, and for all the young athletes in the school who end up being the leaders, what I can do from that position, what it affords me the opportunity to do in leading young people is different than the classroom. Athletes don't want to end up in the principal's office who just happens to be your coach. And at that position, I'm going to hold them to such a high standard, with an expectation of, we're trying to grow you for the next 40, 50, 60 years of your life here. We're not going to allow you to just be a good athlete here. And it ends the day that that you graduate. So I think it's actually been pivotal. Now the flip side of it is, my growth it stops there because they're not going to have a 12-month principal be the head basketball coach. And frankly, I don't think I can be a 12-month principal and be the head basketball coach as well. So my professional growth has stopped, and that's okay for now. But at some point, I'd like to continue that.
So, are there some guiding principles from your basketball career and your coaching career that you continue to use as an administrator in your school?
Yeah, I think we're going to start with we're going to make sure we do the little things right. Now, let's start with that. Let's start building habits of, okay, the rule is you're not allowed to have your phone out in class. Okay, there's no discussion here. If you can do that, then we can do the next step where the learning begins to take place. Okay, the rule is you go directly to the restroom and back. Okay, that's exactly what you do. All right, it's the same with basketball. The rule is you come out of the locker room with your shoes tied and your shirt tucked in. That's what you do. So kids walk into the school understanding that there's something I'm supposed to be doing. I just walked into the school. I take my hat off. I just walked into school. I say good morning to the people at security check. So we try to get them to do the smallest things correct, which, as you know, are so big for a culture. They don't maybe quite understand that. And we just keep reiterating and reiterating, and you're not going to wear us down. We're going to keep making sure that you do the smallest things right so that you can begin to create the correct habits that are going to allow you to be successful. Yeah. It's no different than coaching.
Absolutely. So, for those who aren't familiar with Newcastle, maybe tell us a little bit about the culture of the school, the demographic breakdown. What's Newcastle like?
So, I mean, I think for years, Newcastle in general was built on homogeneous neighborhoods and homogeneous churches, and each side of town kind of was, the ethnic side of town or the African American side or the white Anglo-Saxon side. And over time, many people from Newcastle moved out. So we've become a more transient community. We had a lot of heavy influx of people who have moved here from Detroit. We've had a heavy Puerto Rican population move in after the hurricane in Puerto Rico. So it's changed our demographics considerably. We're 100% free and reduced lunch. Every kid gets a breakfast in the morning and gets lunch. So we have kids who are coming here with some basic needs not met. So we feel we're obligated to make sure we meet those needs so that the learning process can begin. So the kids come to us with challenges. You think about, Christmas break, and we had a principal send a text out to our group, and he says, we have kids coming back from Christmas break, and it wasn't very magical for them. And so they come back frustrated, hurt, disappointed, maybe angry. So those are all kind of things that we're dealing with in our kids every day and challenges that we're trying to meet, because at the end of the day, learning is the bottom line. But they come with major concerns and so much weight. So we try to find ways to take that weight off of them. And I think that that's what the feeding of the kids helps that process. If they need a jacket, they need a coat, we make sure we supply them. We try to get their basic needs met. And just understand, where they're coming from and what they're dealing with on a daily basis. And I think what's great about our school is that we have teachers that understand that completely. I mean, completely. Because if you don't, there's going to be a level of frustration sometimes that can overwhelm you and diminish your effectiveness as a teacher. But we're proud of what we get to do every day. We're charged with serving a different demographic, and there's a challenge that goes with that. But we love that.
So you mentioned the teachers. I've talked to different people, and they always say, "Man, I'd love to be a school teacher." Right? Good salary, great benefits. You got your summers off. When you talk with members of your staff, what are they telling you? What is it like to be a school teacher in this day and age?
It's difficult. I mean, that's why you see so many people leaving the profession. It's difficult, especially when the starting pay for a teacher in many places is $40,000 to $50,000, which you can't live on that. Very difficult to live on that. So you come to work every day and you're challenged every day, and it's difficult. And then you go home and you have your stresses because your financial needs probably aren't met. So that's why you see so few people going into this profession. Now, the back end is good and the pension is good in terms of all those things. But teachers crawl to the finish line
Mm.
in the end. They crawl to the finish line. So as administrators, we try to lend a level of support. We have an outstanding head principal, Kim Claditis. I mean, she has done a great job of galvanizing her administrating staff, her teachers, and get everyone on a singular mission for our kids. And she understands she doesn't want to see that burnout in teachers, but it's natural. My wife's a special ed teacher at Newcastle. You're a special ed teacher in a district with our demographics and the level of poverty that we serve. Um, you are challenged daily, and so that's a discussion her and I have a lot, and we try to do some things to maybe relieve some of that stress for them, but it's not an easy job.
So you started as a teacher. How has it changed over the years? What qualities do you need today to be a great teacher?
You have to understand the students you're dealing with first. Understand it, be empathetic about it, but at the same time, try to hold them to a standard that will allow them to be successful. And I think what the frustration is that we know what the fix is. Okay, certainly we can always do better jobs as educators when we continue to change and evolve. But the challenge is that our parents need to be better in general. I'm not talking about all parents, but our parents need to be better. But it's and a lot of times it's generational. It's a cycle of so you have an existing parent who maybe had a child young and maybe their parents weren't very good parents, so they've never really observed good parenting. Okay, so they don't really know the correct way to parent and what to allow their kids to do and not do, and to hold them to certain standards at home, and they're distracted, and a lot of times they're trying to survive, you know. So you put all of that together, and our kids come to school not always understanding what's appropriate and what's not. So it's our job to maybe teach them some things that maybe we were blessed to learn at home. So, trying to break those cycles, if we can somehow, as leaders, reach out to families and say, look, we can help you. Maybe you're not quite sure how to, a really appropriate way to raise your children. We can help you with that. We can tell you some things. Like I'll have a parent sitting in front of me and the child will, they'll say, I just can't, I can't get him to do what I want him to do. I can't get him to get out of bed in the morning. And I'll look at him and I'll say, okay, well, does he have a cell phone right now? They'll say, yeah. I'll say, well, you pay for it? I say, yeah. I said, why does he still have it? Why does he still have? I don't get when he's not doing what he's supposed to do. You don't give him the things that he wants. I always think back to when I was a kid. When I did something wrong, I would rather my father and my mother yell at me. Just don't tell me I can't go out tonight. Just don't tell me I can't go to basketball practice. So you take away what they value, they'll begin to think twice about doing things that they shouldn't be doing.
So you have 4 kids of your own.
I do.
So when practice is over, you guys get to connect at some point. 2 still in the high school, correct? 2 still in high school?
2 still in high school.
Okay.
No, 1 still in high school.
1 still in high school.
Okay.
What are they telling you? What's Gino telling you when he gets home? What's it like to be a high school student today?
They don't tell you a lot. Boys don't share with you the way girls do. Girls come home and they have diarrhea of the mouth of me. They want to tell you everything, my sons, they're just boys being boys. But they know that I have a pulse on it. Like one thing I'll say is like my dad knew what was going on, but my dad was doing what men did in the 70s and 80s. He went to work, he came home, he ate dinner, talked about their day at dinner, went to his recliner, got up and did it again the next day. And I respected the heck out of that. My mom was taking care of things at home, and but I know that times are different, so I have to have a pulse on things. I still try to operate the way my dad was because I just thought it was the right way. But I have to have a pulse on things because things could go sideways immediately in today's and quickly in today's society. So we're careful about that. But yeah, he doesn't say much. Um, my thing with my kids, Tim, is I always tell them that if you're like everybody else, you're probably wrong.
Mm.
We want to be different. We're not going to go with the norm. Uh, I'm not. I don't like where the norm is going. We're going to operate in a different manner. We hope.
So, based on your observations as a parent, your discussions with your kids, what you see as an assistant principal at the school, what do teenagers need most today?
Well, they need parents. They need parents that teenagers need parents who will tell them the truth. They need people in their life that'll tell them the truth. Okay. And again, we have tons of great parents in our school district. I mean, tons. And other parents, it's not an indictment on them. It's a sad reality of what they weren't blessed to learn growing up. But I think the truth is the key. And like, parents don't want to tell their kids the truth because it hurts their kids. And when their kids are hurt, it hurts them. And they don't like the way that feels. So that's the ultimate sacrifice for you as a parent. Like, my dad didn't care about the way I felt. He was not concerned with my feelings. I'm not concerned with my players' feelings, and I'm not concerned with my children's feelings, but I'm concerned that they know the actual reality of who they are and what they're doing. And if that hurts their feelings, they'll survive. They'll be just fine. But then they have to understand how to fix that, and we can help them with that. That's what we do. Here's what you're doing wrong. Here's how we need to go about fixing it. You know.
So, you were blessed to grow up in a time where the football coach, the basketball coach, they were considered the leaders of the community, not
Mm-hmm.
just by students, but by
Yeah.
people out in their community. Now, in your role as a principal, as administrator in the school district, you have that authority not only over students, but over your players. Have you ever had to discipline one of your players for something that happened at school?
Yes, I have, but not that often. And um, that's something for me that I'm proud of. I'm proud of that. I think that we've set a standard that it hasn't had to happen very often. But yes, I've had to suspend kids, but when I think that it was much more normal over a long period of time where kids were misbehaving in school that were athletes. But again, I think that position, it just helps. And I think on top of all that, the other thing that helps is because I don't want to say that my players are perfect; they make mistakes too. But the other thing that helps is that when a teacher walks down to my office or stops me in the hall and says, "Hey, you might want to get ahead of this," but I've seen this kid in the hall 2 or 3 times, 4 times a day. Um, he came late to my class the last 2 days. So and so was sleeping in class, and I can get him down to my office and say, where this is going. And I think the thing is that they know that I will take it away from them. Okay. And I think the second that they believe that, that you care more about winning and that you won't hold them accountable to something that they do in school, that you've lost all your leverage. But as long as they know that even in the biggest moments, that if you have to do it, you'll do it. And I had to do it, a few years ago. I had to let a kid go for the entire WPL playoffs. He's my best player, leading rebounder. Broke my heart, but I had to do it. And so I think that sends a message to the kids that is, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, I'm going to take away what you love most.
So, do you see your role as similar to maybe a police officer, where they'll tell you that good police work is proactive?
Mm-hmm.
It's being known in the community, getting to know the people of the community. Is it similar for principal?
Yeah, I think for me to not acknowledge the role that I play beyond just being a head basketball coach would be irresponsible. And I think with that, and with some of our success and some of the things that we've done, I have an obligation to it. That there's things that I can potentially do because of it that can help our community. And there's been times, unfortunately, where we've had to bridge racial gaps and have some really tough discussions amongst the school district and our African American community together to try to bridge some gaps. Um, and I think that there's been tremendous growth because of it. And I think that knowing how much I care about the kids in our community helps in that process, and they know it's genuine.
Yeah, I think your role really is almost a community leader. I mean, I've argued this before that I think the two things that bring people of all cultures together are sports and music.
Yeah, no doubt.
The locker room is probably the most diverse, inclusive place I can think of. Would you agree?
It's probably my favorite place in the world. When I think about what I miss most about playing, it's the locker room. And we have a team room, and that team room is theirs. They could put their phones wherever they want. They could leave as much money out. They can leave it in their locker open. Nobody's going to touch anything in that team room. That's our sanctuary. That's our. They're required to keep that team room spotless, clean. That's their house, and that's where stuff happens. That's where discussions happens. That's where fun, good natured ribbing. Um, the locker room is such an awesome place to learn about yourself and find out who your leaders are. And I don't go in there. Like I said, I don't go into that team room. We meet outside the team room. I miss that. Um, and as years go by, when I sit with my former players, I think probably what they talk about most is that time after practice in that team room. And sometimes I got to be like, guys, it's time to go home. They'll just sit on their stools, talking, laughing, arguing. I mean, all of it. I mean, the amount of arguments that have taken place about who's the GOAT, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. Like if I say,
Well,
okay,
that's not an argument.
I don't think it is. You and I don't, but so I'll walk in and they'll say, Coach, who's the GOAT? I'm like, I don't know, one guy has 6 championships and no losses. The other guy doesn't. But one thing I can do is count, right? So, but there's never really any fights or fists. But I'll tell you what, man, they'll argue about that forever. So yeah, the locker room's a special place.
Yeah. Talk about your hardest days at work.
I think that the most difficult days at work are obviously when something tragic happens. You can't, we lost a kid this year. Um, and I thought that, our head principal did just such an awesome job of, getting the right support networks in place and for the kids in school and watching our teachers rally around all that and supporting the families financially. But when you have a tragedy in school, when you lose a student, um, there's nothing that compares to that. Now, on a day to day basis, when you just have a day, they talk about these full moons. Tim, I don't, I'm not supposed to believe that, but man, when I'm driving down home from practice, and I look at that moon and it looks like that light right there, I'm startled because those next days, for whatever reason, are difficult. So when you have those days where it's just discipline infraction after discipline infraction after discipline infraction, it wears on you a little bit and beats you up. And then when that day's over, I got to walk down to that field house and coach those kids for the next 3 hours and somehow have the right temperament uh, to do it the right way, but not based on my emotions or frustrations of the day.
Now, you mentioned the tragedy that the school experienced. If you wouldn't mind, can you walk us through that day? Maybe share the process for how things worked that day, so other school districts who
Yeah.
may encounter that
Yeah, so
help
we
them.
bring in outside agencies, human services and different agencies for grief counseling, and we have what we call our core team, our SAP team, which is a group of teachers, counselors, other outside agencies that meet every Wednesday that work with those process. We brought in support dogs, um, food, and then we use our guidance conference room as kind of the headquarters of all of that. And the kids are at free reign to come down, sit, talk, express themselves, maybe just meet with somebody one on one, um, utilize the support dogs, and maybe even ask for, an outside agency to uh, maybe have some discussions even outside of school. So all you want to do is just make sure that you give all the support that you can and make it available to them, and let the parents know that this is available to your kids, um, and allow them that time to grieve, and really not think that, once the day is come and gone, that those feelings are over. You have to keep those options open for a little bit of time.
And what did you see in the student population? How did they process that?
Well, I mean, I think the students that were closest to him, it was a real struggle. And you had a couple kids that didn't come to school for a few days, but um, it's difficult for them because, when you lose a kid, um, kids start to reflect on all kinds of things, and they're young and have no experience in that, and maybe just how to deal with it. There's a level of pain that you see in their faces that's abnormal, and that's hard for us. But our guidance counselors, Miss Gibson, Mr. Michael Trott, Dr. DeCarbo, man, you can't say enough about them. And again, I think that's when you see the genuine care of your staff at those moments when they rally around it. I think that's when we're at our very best. Yeah, that's what I love about Newcastle.
Yeah. So a little earlier, you talked about cell phones. Do you have an official policy at Newcastle?
We do. So we don't allow kids to have their cell phones out. We allow them to have them out in lunch. That's their time. They can utilize their cell phones. But our policy is simple, Tim, is that if a teacher sees it, they're going to ask for it. It's called a reasonable request. And if you give it to them, teacher's going to bring it down to my office. You come get it at the end of the day. No issues at all. Okay, but the second you look at an adult and you tell them no, then you're going to go home for 3 days. So, right, so we keep it simple. Give it to us. So we tell them keep it in your locker. If you want to put it in your pocket, then you're running the risk of a teacher seeing it and asking for it. And if they ask, you just need to say yes, because the level of distraction that those phones have created, I mean, that's their end all be all. It stimulates them in a way that nothing else can in their life right now, and we had to make a move like that.
Was there a time then where they were permitted?
Yeah, it was.
And what change have you seen in the kids
It's
since?
significant, Tim. Just because they're more focused in the classroom, they know what it is. Now, occasionally the kids will have mouth to mouth. Occasionally the kid will say no. What I tell parents or say, you mean you're suspending my kid 3 days for having? No, I'm telling them, you suspend your kid 3 days because he chose wrong over right. You can do is hand it to him, and we can't effectively run a school if we have students who are looking at adults and when given a directive and telling them no. So for us, it's an egregious infraction. And that's the way we see it from our lens. And then they understand that. But yes, and then when you have an occasional fight in school, uh, kids will rip out that cell phone and can't wait to film it. And that, for me, is this sad reality of our society where we're trying to move kids away from that, okay, this appears normal to you. This is gross. You can't wait to film this fight, upload it to some form of social media, humiliate whoever was involved in that fight. And it's on there forever. And getting kids to understand just how wrong that is. Now, you're getting 10 days out if you do that, because that's how egregious we think that is.
Now let me double click on the suspensions. Do some kids think of that as a vacation, especially if their parents aren't at home? And like, how does that work?
Yeah, and when you call a parent and you have that discussion with them, man, you tell them, they'll say, well, he's just going to. I said, this is where your job as a parent is more important than anything. It's your job to make sure that this is not. It's your job to make sure it's a miserable 10 days. Miserable 10 days. Give them a bucket. Give them a sponge. Tell them to clean the kitchen. Get him up in the morning. Don't let him sleep in. Take his games. Take his cell phones. Make it difficult for him. Make him understand that this is the reality of when you don't do what you're supposed to do. We try to use in-school suspension when we can. we try our hardest not to suspend kids. We try to beat our kids to that. You know what I mean? And oftentimes we'll give them an opportunity to reverse a bad decision. And a lot of times when a kid walks in your office and says, Mr. Blundo, I don't know what got into me. I don't know why I said what I said. I just, I've been struggling a little bit in my emotion. And at that point in time, once they acknowledge the mistake that they made, you've accomplished what you wanted to accomplish. A lot of times, a punishment is for a kid to understand just how wrong it was what they did. But if a kid comes in and says, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I'm sorry. Well, at that point in time, you're giving them the minimum consequence you can, because the job is done at that point. They get it, they understand.
Technology in general. What would I experience if I walked through the campus of Newcastle High School?
Well, I mean, kids all have Chromebooks, and they utilize them, and we try to utilize them effectively. And there was a time we were utilizing them almost exclusively, but we kind of backed up a little more, more general instruction. But we have ViewSonic boards. These, you're not going to walk in and see a chalkboard. You're not even going to walk in and see a dry erase board anymore.
Mm.
These ViewSonic boards that the teachers are using today, and just how adept that they are on it. You see some of these, football announcers, and they're on there doing all. I mean, it's the same thing, and it's what these kids understand. I'm probably getting to that point as a coach where, I mean, who knows? We'll be using iPads and huddles instead of dry erase boards at some point. But you have to be careful with technology because it's not a replacement. We still have some teachers in our school that are just legendary, literally legendary, and how good they are in their ability to instruct and teach and pass along knowledge. There's nothing that is better than that.
What makes them legendary? And I'm talking you personally. What makes a great teacher? How do you learn?
I think when I look at some of the best teachers, one, they're just their general content knowledge, just their total understanding of what it is they're instructing. It's like, I really want to play a matchup zone and I want to teach it, but I can't. I don't know it at that level to do it. So I think that there's content that you learn in college, and then there's well-read people who just know this stuff inside out. They have a persona about them where when a student walks in the classroom that their reputation precedes them. They know it's business, but they also have a relationship with their kids. And then they have an ability to pass along what they understand to kids in a way that they can absorb it, learn it, understand it, regurgitate it when they're assessed. I think that those are our best teachers, and we have a number of them. We have a number of them, but it's hard to get to that elite level as a teacher, And most of those teachers that I think of, I mean, they're in their 25th year, 30th year, Teachers are no different than us. If you walk into a classroom and watch a teacher teach a lesson first period and teach that same lesson eighth period, it's considerably better. You know what I mean? It's they think about, they reflect on what maybe the kids absorbed and didn't absorb, and make adjustments as the day goes on, and it's a dynamic lesson at the end of the day.
So mental health, not just in school districts, but among the general population of young people, is a major issue. What is Newcastle doing to address it?
Well, first of all, I think that we're potentially on the verge of a mental health crisis in this country.
Oh, wait, man, tell me more about that then.
I think that kids are so negatively affected by social media and what they're seeing every single day, what is in their face every single day, that is their ultimate influence, that they can't separate reality from what's completely unauthentic and not real. And I think that they are, when given those phones, they are exposed to an entire world at such a young age, nowhere near emotionally ready to handle it. And so now you have kids exposed to drugs, alcohol, sex, and glorifying all that right in front of them at an age where they're they should be so innocent and learning all the other things that helped us to, hopefully become who we were able to become. And I think by the time they're 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, they're completely damaged, just completely damaged by it. And you add on the regular weight of some difficult lives, I think like I said, I think we're on a verge of a mental health crisis. And you try to acknowledge where a kid is. It's like every kid that comes to your school, and you try to meet them where they're at emotionally, and, you know, it, it try to pinpoint where they're dealing with some things. But, we have more kids in emotional support than we've ever had right now in our school district. And I think it's the case. That's the case everywhere. You talk to other schools. That's not unique to just Newcastle. Uh, that's a mental health, and I don't know how you get ahead of it. I don't know how you fix it. I don't know. Kids are 5 steps ahead of you when it comes to that. You know, you can take away their phone; they'll find a way to get their text messages some other way. Um, they're brilliant at it, and you know, I think you can see a fix somewhere. I don't know where it's at with this until it's somehow regulated. I don't know.
Hmm. So is that the most common form of discipline that you levy out for phones, or is there something else that you have to deal with almost on a daily basis?
In terms of the use of phones or
Well, just common
phone.
discipline, yeah, at school.
Yeah, no, I think so. We like there's a vape epidemic right now where kids are vaping at a high level all across the country. Affluent schools, almost all schools now have vape alerts in their bathrooms.
So is that the new cigarette then?
Yeah, yeah, and we tell the kids, I don't think we're starting to now find out exactly what vapes are doing to people now that it's 5, 6 years into it, and this popcorn lungs and cancer, and so you try to discourage it, but again, it comes back to what is normal. When you tell a kid not to vape, they look at you like, well, everyone vapes. you know you know I can remember when my daughter for the first time came down the steps, and she had on a shirt and it wasn't covering her stomach, and I looked at her and I said, yeah, go back upstairs and change your shirt till you have one on that covers your stomach. She was maybe 12. And she looked at me like, well, everyone wears shirts like this. So the norm is strong. And that's what you're fighting. To tell kids that, what you see, what appears to be normal isn't. And that's all of our challenges, you know. And in small group situations, your family, your team, you can do that. Larger the group that you're trying to influence becomes a little more difficult.
So we've been veering down the dark side a little bit. Give me an example of a recent positive interaction you had with a student where you said, man, this is why I come to work every day.
Well, I just think, you know, I love seeing a student drop something, someone help them pick it up. I love seeing someone hold a door. I love hearing kids say please and thank you. And it sounds like it's not a lot, but um, I think it's important. I love, like the other day we were watching films, and I ordered wings for all the kids, and one of my players went up to get wings, and there was like only a few less, and he looked over at the team and said, "Did everybody eat?" He wanted to make sure before he took the last 4 or 5 wings that everybody ate. Like, I love seeing those little things, just manners, and I love seeing our kids route. We have great kids. Uh, I don't want to paint a picture that we don't have good kids. We have kids who are normal kids in society today, that they do some things that they shouldn't be doing based on what is normal. But that's our job. We're trying to fix those things. But um, I love when a kid will find an Apple Watch or a phone in a bathroom and bring it to me and say, "This is someone's phone. I found it." You know, um, I love it when someone will come to me and have the nerve to say so and so was vaping in the bathroom. That's not normal because they're more worried. Most kids are more worried about how they'll be perceived instead of being a kid who's going to pass along, some information that can help us have a safer school and help that kid. So nothing in particular, but those things happen every day, Tim.
Yep. So you mentioned your daughter's shirt that was a little too high. Do you have a dress code at Newcastle?
So we did
Okay.
for years, and I'm glad we don't anymore. For 20 years, I was actually on the original dress code committee where kids had to wear khaki pants, a belt, tuck your shirt in, red shirt, black shirt, gray shirt. Um, and over time, we began to weaken the policy. We started allowing them to not have their shirt tucked in. And then it didn't have to be khaki pants, it could be sweatpants. And then it could be, you can wear shorts and, but as long as it was of color. And then, one time you could just have a small logo, but then it could be, then it just had to be, then it became just a color policy. You had to wear red, white, black, gray. And then over time, and the new superintendent came in and said, let's get rid of it altogether. Let's let kids come to school. We don't allow them to wear pajama pants. Okay, we didn't used to allow them to wear slides, but now we do. So we've been making decisions based on, okay, if we have this dress policy, why? And what effect does it have on education? And we got to the point where there really was no reason to have it. Let the kids come to school comfortable. We didn't used to allow kids to wear hoodies. I mean, what happens in education, sometimes you'll have an incident. Maybe an incident where a kid will put up a hood and tie it tight and go into a classroom and maybe steal something. Then you couldn't see who he was on camera. Then all of a sudden you make a policy, no hoodies. Or someone gets dragged across the floor by their hoodie in a fight. Okay, no hoodies. So we become less reactionary. And the other thing we've learned is that, okay, we're not going to make a policy based on a 0.5% thing that could potentially happen. The kids are cold. They want to wear hoodies. Let's let them wear hoodies. Kids want to come to school comfortable. We didn't let kids wear jeans for years. Now kids can wear blue jeans to school. No one wears blue jeans. They just don't wear them. So I think that's what I learned about being in administration is that if you're going to put a policy in place or you have one in place, let's sit back and ask ourselves why and what effect negatively or positively does it happen. And then let's not put policies in place that have maybe a 0.5% chance of occurring.
So no issues with someone coming in with a $400 pair of sneakers and another kid's going to pay less. Do you see any of those type of things?
I think what we found in the actual policy that we had, the dress policy, is that you can identify the haves and have-nots anywhere. And I think kids are more tolerant of those things today. You'd be surprised. I think that they're less judgmental of the kids who don't have the same things that they have. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. I think that Newcastle is Newcastle. This is who we are collectively. We have some kids who have more than others, but we're Newcastle.
So as we record, basketball season is in full swing. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your schedule right now.
I'm off today. We're off today. We're not practicing today, which is nice, but it's school all day. Practice at 3 or practice at 6. Films after. Still trying to stay connected to what my son Gino is doing out in Shannock. He has a game tonight. I'll be able to attend his games because we're playing most of our games on Mondays and Thursdays. My son Ralphie's at IUP. He plays on Wednesdays and Saturdays. We were up there this weekend. PSAC basketball is outstanding.
Excellent level.
Oh, my goodness.
Absolutely.
So I'm watching a ton of basketball. I'm coaching a ton of basketball. We're just coming off 16 days off for Christmas break. And, I'm still trying to stay engaged with my children at home, my wife. And, that's my challenge, Tim. That's my challenge to continue to work, to be present at home. I know you and I have talked about that a number of times. It's my biggest deficiency. I get just caught up in what I'm doing, and it absorbs your mind. You have a responsibility to a team, and you can't let it dominate your thoughts. If you can be present when you're at home, that's a real man's man. And my dad did that. He worked hard his whole life, but when he was home with us.
So, how has your coaching career changed from where you are today from where you were 15 years ago?
Well, you fight the energy battle a little bit. You got to talk to yourself sometimes to get yourself ready to go for practice and understand that they have to have all of you. Um, I've always been sympathetic of certain situations with kids. I think I'm probably more empathetic now than ever. Uh, I, I really consider circumstances a lot, whereas I didn't always do that before. It was what it was. If you didn't do what you were supposed to do, um, you know, and then the consequences were the consequences. But I think as times change and years go by and kids change, I have to change some. I think our core principles are the same, but there's a lot to acknowledge when you're working with kids today. And, we've gotten better at that. And I think my other players look at me sometimes like, Coach, you softened up, man. And I said, no. I says I'm just giving consideration where it's needed. They don't want to hear that.
Billis
Hey,
says that a lot about Coach K.
yeah.
He said he was not the same coach in 2012 as he was in 1986.
Well, if you walk in our gym now for the first 25 minutes, and we have a speaker blaring with music, and my older players
Wow,
walk in and they
that is
say, for the first 20, like all through our warm up stuff, our stretching and all of our warm up activities and everything that we're doing, and my other players walk in and they go, "What? You would have never done this." But so my question is, how come I wouldn't? Why wouldn't I then? When the reality is, it gets them geared up. It gets the kids moving. They do happen to do things just a little bit harder when you're playing music that they love. So my question is, okay, why didn't I do that? I probably should have done it then, you know. But I was trying to create such a disciplined culture back then too, that I was trying to set a stage. But yeah, I do things that I wouldn't normally do. Sometimes I let kids sit that aren't in practice now. There are some kids, guys 16, 17, 18, sometimes they're standing there for 2.5 hours. Why? You know what I mean? Like, what am I doing to these poor kids? You know? So, yeah, I've changed some things.
so. I love the word discipline. So again, as we're recording, it's the start of a new year. How do you define discipline? Not just for a team, but for someone like you and I who just wants to live a disciplined life. What does that look like?
Doing things that are difficult and right, that are hard, and sustaining it. I think the key word is sustain. A New Year's resolution, they say, is over by January 9th. I think sustaining what you're doing and doing it correctly over and over again for a long period of time through all the discomfort, through all the disappointment, and doing it when you don't feel like it, is the big separator. And truthfully, in athletics and just probably and about anything else, if you want to look at, okay, which separates one team from another team, one person from another team, it's really pretty simple. Every single person and every single team does what they're supposed to do when they feel like it. But the reality of life is that there are a number of days that you simply don't feel like it. And those who continue to do it at a high level and do what they're supposed to do, even on those days that they don't feel like it, that's where you separate yourself. So that's discipline, you know, and that's what we try to get out of our players, And if you can go through a practice and not have, a year, I say a year, and only have maybe 4 or 5 bad practices, they've pretty much sustained it. They've just sustained that discipline.
So let me bring up a name, Kurt Signetti. For my money, that is what he's done is the best coaching job in the history of college coaching.
Yeah.
What is it? Is it sorcery? What is he doing?
I think he's changed habits. He changed habits within the program. He's if you listen to him talk and he talks about his process, he is demanded that from the guy who puts the air in the ball to the quarterback, that they do things at a high level and do it the right way every single day. And I think what happens to a lot of coaches and a lot of leaders is that you get worn out from the pushback. Okay, but once you get them to the point where this becomes their habit, it really isn't as difficult as you think. And I think that's what he's done. I mean, that's how you change a culture. That's how you change a program. Boy, he did it, and he did it quick. Um, he has a persona about him. I think they know who the sheriff is. Um, and obviously, he's recruited really good players. I think the nature of the transfer portal in college sports right now has allowed him to bring in some. You're not doing it. All that culture stuff that we talk about and all those habits that we talk about, that allow you to be the best you can be, but you're not going to be great without great players
Well, all
too.
your plays work better with
They look
better
so
players.
good. I remember when Malik Hooker and those guys left that next year, and we ended up having a good team. We started running like everything that we ran over the course of it. Nothing was working, and I thought, boy, man, what
You
happened?
got dumb all of a sudden.
I
Yeah.
got dumb all of a sudden, yeah, but the players are the catalysts.
Yeah. So this may sound random, but this is in general, not sports specific. But is college for everyone?
No, it isn't. I'm so my second daughter, when she was in the sixth grade, um, she said, I'm going to go to beauty school, and my daughter Allie goes into Shannock, and at a school like Neshannock, and this isn't putting down Neshannock any. I'm just saying the culture of Neshannock is that's not an easy thing to say out there and live it and do it and not care about the perception of that you're probably one of the very few kids in your entire class that isn't going on to college. And she went on to beauty school and she finished in a year and she was completely driven. And she worked a year at a place down in Pittsburgh and today has her own shop in town with people who work for her. And when I watch her doing what she's doing at 21 years of age and making good money and passionate and loving what she's doing, I'm like, this is it. This is it. If part of your road is in college, I mean, I'm not sure who in our world said that wasn't okay. I mean, I think some colleges is a scam. Honestly, some. 60, 70, $80,000. A year to go to school. You're gonna get your return on that investment. It's not going to be easy. So there are a lot of roads to get to success, and I'm real proud of her for the road that she took.
That's amazing. Good for her.
Yeah.
So how would you describe the education system today, primarily secondary education? I think the common criticism is as much as the world's changed over the past 100 years, the schooling system is something that hasn't. It's basically, we're still, other than the technology, we're doing the same things we've done since 1895.
Yeah, wake up, right? Go to school, bell rings, go to the next class, yeah. And I think that obviously other forms of education out there. There's a lot of cyber school. There's a lot of, there's some magnet schools out there. But you're right. Generally, it's the same. I think what's different is bureaucracy plays such a role in it now, and there's so many mandates that come down that kind of drive teaching in a way that maybe isn't comfortable for us or isn't as authentic. That's the part I think like a lot of teachers don't like, is that, somehow you have to be assessed on how well you're doing. And I don't, that's a reality. What I love about Newcastle is, and I love about the way our superintendent has geared things is that it's the assessment testing and all that stuff is important and we want to do well, but it's not going to be our end all be all. We're more than just a test score and what we're trying to do. So, but a lot of school districts are completely driven by that number because their status is based on how well they're doing on those assessments, and it's important to them. Whereas, I'm not saying it's not important to us. It is important to us, and we put a lot of time into it. But we're not just going to completely teach to a test, so that our test scores are what maybe society wants them to be.
So if you could make some changes to the overall system, what would be the first change you would make?
Man, that's a great question. Tim, I'd have to give that a lot of thought. You think about me, like I'm ingrained in this. I've been going to school this way. since I was 5. I've been living by a school bell since I was 5 years old. I'm 52 now. You know what I mean? Like it's been my entire life. You know what I mean? So I appreciate you, making me think there. Is there a better way? And there has to be. All kids learn differently. I think we know that. Um, but yeah, that's something to think about for
Well, let me
sure.
give you an example. There's a school called Alpha School. I think there are 3 or 4 locations, but it started in Austin, Texas. And the learning period each day is just 2 hours, 9 to 11, but all instruction is done through AI.
Hmm.
Kids have their laptop, their Chromebook, whatever it is, and they're learning based on AI prompts. Then in the afternoon, it's all hands-on experience. They're going out and working in the theater, creating their own plays, working in farmers markets, doing those things like that. They still have adults on campus, but they're called coaches.
Hmm.
They're not necessarily
Yeah.
teachers. They're there to become cheerleaders, essentially.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
It's awesome. We have a week in our school every year. It's called Business Week, and we have a company that comes in and we raise money to do it, and they split the kids up into teams. 13, 14 kids to a team. They pick a CEO. They pick a CFO. They pick a head of marketing, and they lead their teams. And what they do is they create a product, all right, and they create a prototype. They market it. They do research and development on it, and they have trade shows where they actually demonstrate their product. They have tally sheets, and they have stock market meetings, and they do all these things over a course of a week. And I would say, to what you're saying is, there's no other time during the school year where the kids are that engaged, and it's competitive. And the winning team, each kid gets $100 at the end if they win. But you have to win the marketing portion of it. You have to win what's called your RONA, which is your return on investment. You have to win your stockholders meeting, your ability to explain where you put your money, how much money you put into research and development, how much money you put into marketing, how much money you put into product, and how it affected the amount of money you made each quarter. So it's great to see the kids excited about something like that. And I think, that type of learning is what you're talking about. And, um, maybe in a school district, maybe we worry too much about a managed building sometimes. And maybe, you know, that type of learning is less structured, but probably more effective.
So, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the greatest, how high is discipline on that scale?
For us, how
First,
important it is.
yeah.
Well, until you have a disciplined and well managed classroom and school, you can't even get started. It's first. I mean, well, I think first is safety. You got to make sure your school is safe for your kids, but then you have to have a well managed school where kids understand the expectations and conduct themselves the right way. And then at that point, that's when the learning could take place. Because otherwise, there's just way too many distractions for learning to take place. So yeah, it's high. It's important. Well, how many great basketball teams have you seen? And you look at that and say, man, that's an incredibly talented team with no discipline, and you can't win. You can't have success. So it's extremely important.
So, you mentioned a little bit earlier that you've been answering a school bell since you were age 5. And you've probably been in your career around 30 years, I would guess, about this point. Would you recommend a career in education to a young person today?
Based on my experience, yes. Um, if that's something that they're passionate about, yes. If it's something that they want to do, yes. I mean, our young people need passionate people that understand what they're going through in order to teach, instruct, change, um, create relationships with. But if you're not passionate about it, don't do it. It's not a job you can do just to collect a paycheck. If you don't love kids and want to help kids and serve the kids that you're charged with serving, depending on where you're at. It's going to be different at Upper St. Clair than it's going to be at Upper Aliquippa or Newcastle. All right. And I think go to a place where you think you can be effective. Don't just go anywhere. I don't know that I can go to North Allegheny and be effective there. And I don't know that kids think about it. So let me get the job. You know what I mean? We'll figure it out from there. But yeah, if you're passionate about teaching and wanting to create relationships with kids and help them, then absolutely. But if you're not, don't do it.
Yeah. What were you hoping I would ask you today?
About families, about parenting.
Talk to me.
It's something that tugs at me because I feel like it's it's the antibiotic. It's the cure of any sickness. Okay, I think right now it's a antihistamine, it's a cough syrup. It's how do we, if it could just be better. And I don't have the answer to it. Okay, but I think that leadership in general hasn't challenged it enough. I don't think anybody wants to stand up and say, "Fathers, you're doing a poor job." Nobody wants to say it. Um, Moms, you can do better. Nobody wants to say it. And I think that leaders have had opportunities over the years. You don't hear it enough because it's the ultimate insult. You know what I mean? And I don't think there's enough thought given into, okay, where is that fix? How do we connect with families to help families and parents who struggle with parenting and have had no means to learn how to do it in their life? It's not their fault. How do you create a connection where you can fix that? And that's something that I think there's, to have that discussion with a lot of people in our school, and a lot of people praying about it and thinking about it. And, but if we could do it, you can fix it a lot, and you can move our country in the right direction really quick. But how often have you heard people talk about it or challenge it and say it?
So whose responsibility is that?
Well, I think that that's the problem. Nobody has really taken responsibility. Is it the schools? No. Um, it's in my family. It's my responsibility to make sure that my children observe the right things, so that they can move on. It's posterity. It's generational. It's forever. Your impact is forever. What they see. Hopefully they'll raise their kids what we think is the right way, and then their families will. But it works the other way too. Okay, so somewhere a cycle has to be broken where there's a change and you see positive movement in the right direction. You know, so you look at a lot of the successful kids who have come out of Newcastle. You look at, like, for Malik Hooker. I mean, he has an incredible mother. I mean, just incredible. Sean Anderson, same thing, just incredible parents. Anthony Richards, Brandon. I mean, I can go on and on and on. But so you're able to see the impact of it or not. And there's a trust factor there. There's a trust factor there for a parent to allow someone who isn't their parent to correct, be hard on their child, and just trust it isn't always easy either. So yeah, those are the things that tug at me, that I think about a lot. Because I just know that if we could get it, we can move it, things get better real quick.
So we're going to have a lot of parents listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
From hearing you talk earlier, it sounds like the tension for us as parents is that feeling that we get when we have to say no, or
Mm-hmm.
to say you're better than that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Is it more? It's not the kids; it's actually us.
Yeah. So what I say to parents, and I've said this to parents, I said, so you not doing it is selfish. You got to love your kid enough to tell them the truth or take away from them. I said, but you not saying what you had to say, or taking away from, or saying no, is selfish because you don't like the way it makes you feel, but you love them so much. You know, it's the feeling is your feeling, but it's the right thing for you to do. It's hard for a parent to say, I don't really know what to do. That's a hard thing to do, or to be vulnerable enough to say, can you help me? I have a tough situation here. It's just me. That's not easy for a parent to do, and I'm not going to sit here and say that it is. Um, I understand the plight. We all do, but we're here to help. You know, and we will if if you need us. So yeah, I'd say that's.
Hmm. So, Ralph, thank you so much for coming back here with us today, man. As I told you a little bit earlier, it's going to be another wonderful podcast, and I'm sure people are going to be impacted. They're going to be moved. They're going to be motivated to take some action in their own lives. So, if there's one other thing that we talked about today that you just want to reaffirm before we get off the microphones today, what would that be?
Well, I mean, all your questions are so insightful, Tim. I've been blessed to do what I do in the district that I love more than anything. Um, I was blessed with great parenting and the ability to, because of that, to acknowledge the plight of some of the young people and some of the families in our district. And, you just hope and pray that we can continue to move kids. The impact is significant. A kid comes to school, and at 18 years old, they begin the next 60, 70, 80 years of their life. And what's it going to look like for them? What are we doing as administrators, teachers, and parents to get them ready for that life? And I think when you look at it that way, you realize just how significant it is and what you're trying to do. So, and then for kids, we try to paint that picture for them. What do you want it to look like? And if this is what you want it to look like, here's the habits you have to create to give yourself an opportunity for it to look like that.
Amen. It's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
Ralph, thank you again, man. Appreciate
Yeah.
everything you do, and I appreciate you even more. So
Yeah.
good
Thanks,
seeing
Tim.
you again, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. It's awesome.